Hi, and welcome to the Becoming Trauma-Informed podcast, where we help you understand how your past painful experiences are affecting your current reality and how you can shift those so you can create your desired future. I'm Dr. Lee, and both myself and our team at the Institute for Trauma and Psychological Safety are excited to support you on your journey. We talk about all the things on this podcast. No topic gets left uncovered. So, extending a content warning to you before we get started. If you notice yourself getting activated while listening, invitation to take care of yourself and to pause, skip ahead a bit, or just check out another episode. Let's dive in.
Okay, hello and welcome back to the Shannon Show. This episode has been a long time coming. Today I'm joined by my friend, and I think it's safe to say at this point, in a lot of ways, my mentor, Dr. Lee C. Cordell. Lee is a doctorally prepared, former practicing nurse practitioner turned founder and CEO of the Institute for Trauma and Psychological Safety. We love that mouthful.
I know, right?
She is a visionary with a mission to contribute to a world where we are able to feel safe being who we are while supporting others to feel the same. Okay, I already know that you and I are going to have a really tough time staying on schedule, so let's just jump right in. Tell me in your words who you are and what lights you up.
So, who am I?
Who am I even?
Who am I? I hold a lot of identities. You talked about some of them. I run the Institute, CEO and founder there. I'm a nurse practitioner, used to practice at the bedside in bone marrow transplant, critical care, hematology, taught in advanced practice, graduate level nursing. I taught the 3 core courses that every nurse practitioner has to take to be a nurse practitioner.
No big deal.
Yeah, it was really fun because people were with me for a whole year. So if they loved me, yay. If not, sorry.
Great for both of us.
I know. Right? Yay. But I feel like there's also the identities that kind of brought me into this work. I'm a woman of color in a bigger body. I have the trifecta of neurodivergence, I like to say, of ADHD, complex PTSD, and autism. I'm a human who lived in chronic states of like hypo and hyper arousal for 2.5 decades, 3 decades almost, before learning like how to really come out of that. And so that's really a huge part of who I am and why I do what I do and why what I do lights me up so much. I think most importantly, I'm a mom. I have 3 amazing, I call them little ones. They're not little anymore. They're the oldest just turned 13 and my twins are going to be 11 in a month, and they are my absolute joy. If you said pick between shutting down the Institute or like spending a week with your kids, I'd be like, oh, easy, done, right? So, yeah. And I am also married and in a relationship that like I truly feel like is one that I'm super blessed to have. I feel like most people don't have the type of relationship that I have with my husband. And funnily enough, he's also named Lee. So he works with us at the Institute, and he goes by TLC there because that way we can keep everything straight. And he's my best friend, my ride or die. He's my human. So that's who I am. Yeah, I think it's enough, right?
Okay, did we cover all of the intersections? I think that's one of my favorite things in talking to people is like, the more that you dig in, you're like, oh, there's more. Oh, there's more.
Yeah.
Oh, there's more.
Yeah.
Which is why, for me, I think doing the work that we do at the Institute is so important, right? It's like getting really curious and figuring out why people are the way that they are and what makes them tick and what lights them up and where their reactions come from. And that's actually part of the first question that I'm going to ask you.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, so for me, I joined TRIPS almost immediately. I think you know that. So I stumbled upon you, and I've shared this story with you already in the past of like, it was just right place, right time. Everything fell into place because for me, I was looking for something for my business, right? I was working as a financial consultant, am working as a financial consultant for neurodivergent and oftentimes trauma affected humans. And I wanted to make sure, because finance is such an oofy place, right? People are carrying so much baggage that a lot of times they don't even realize they are. So I was actively seeking out some sort of continued education around trauma to make sure that I was serving my clients in the best way possible. And then what I realized when I got inside of trips, that it was like, oh, this is actually just as much for me, if not more so. And then that sort of took me down the path of wanting to be a teacher trainer, which is like kind of the next step after trips if you decide to take it a step further. So anyway, that hasn't changed at all for me. All of it was like 100% yes. And it's only become more of a yes as I've gone through trips and then gone through halfway through. Like, it's wild to even think about. We're already halfway through teacher training. How is that even?
I know.
Where did this year go?
What happened?
So again, like what kind of changed for me during that process was the why of like why I want to do this work and why it's so important to me, to the point that now I'm at a place where I haven't fully decided yet, but I'm thinking I might shift my business even more so to have that be more of a focus, right? So the question is, what was your original intent for trips? And is that the same, or has it sort of morphed since then?
Yeah. So let me say this too, because people, TRIP stands for trauma informed, psychologically safe. And so it's a 9-month certificate program, not a certification program. Hear that? I'm very clear about that. The teacher training portion that comes after is a certification program. But this first part is really, I designed it for people who wanted to learn, right? Like people who were less worried about the paper at the end and more interested in, well, this really like lights me up. This excites me. I think that this would be helpful for my business. I think this would be helpful for me, the humans I'm in relationship with. So when I founded the Institute, I came up with trips and then the subsequent teacher training portion at the same time.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. I looked at it and I said, okay, I want to create 9 months for people who want to just learn this and apply it to their everyday situation. And then I want to add on 9 months for people who actually want to take what we are teaching and like embody it and then go out into the world and say, I'm a TRIPS teacher or I'm a TRIPS trainer. Like this is the context through which I'm going to be doing things with you, and like actually have that little seal next to their name of like, I am a TRIPS or a TRIPS teacher trainer, like certified. And when I designed this, it came out of a couple places. One is, I've been in academia and higher education, adult education for a really long time. By that point, I'd gotten 4 degrees. So I had been in 12, 13 years of adult education. I'd also gone and done a bunch of other certifications and things like that. And so I saw how academia did stuff. And I saw, I think I want to be so clear here. There's so many beautiful parts about academia. And one of the things that we look at inside of trips is systems and how systems can create trauma when unwittingly, right? Like not intentionally, but they can create trauma. And I saw the trauma that my students went through going through a traditional adult education program. I saw the trauma that I experienced going through a traditional adult education program, not just from a financial perspective, because my student loans just got under 100 grand. So like, yay.
Yeah.
Like,
congratulations for that.
Right? Yeah, I started school in 2004. It's 2023. We just got under 100 grand. Yay! So excited. So there's that piece, but there was also the piece of, and actually, we just finished up. My sister's here in the hotel room with me while we're recording, and she's our director of programming, she's the one who helps with curriculum too, because she's also in academia. We just finished up this education conference and we are talking, like just sitting in on these sessions, they're talking about all of these ways that these students are coming in just like they're amped. They
Yeah.
are hyper vigilant. They are stressed out because they have been taught, be perfect, be as perfect as possible to get into school and get the scholarships and do the things. And so part of trips was like, I want to like unschool, right?
Mhm.
There's no tests. There's no quizzes. We had quizzes, but they were optional. And actually we got rid of them because they were stressing people out. So, like you don't have to show up to class. You can watch the replays. Yes, this is a 9-month program, but you have 15 months to complete it. Like, yes, there are a couple places that there are quote unquote deadlines, and also come to us if those aren't working for you because we will figure it out. And that was so important to me. So I haven't actually had the opportunity, and I'm really grateful for this, to like talk about how I designed it, because really I wanted people to be able to look at trauma in a space that wasn't going to re-traumatize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the trips has not changed, and teacher training has not changed. My intent for what that has been has not changed. What has changed is that we've added a bunch of stuff around trips and
Mm.
teacher training at the Institute. So now what was like, and what still remains as our core as our core offering, there's now other things that people can go do that are not 9 months, they're a couple months, or they're not focused on a more holistic thing. They're focused more specifically on business, or they're focused more
Right.
specifically on relationships. And so that, I think, is the part that the Institute has shifted. But trips and teacher training, like, that will always be a place where people can come dive deep or shallow and like come up for air when they need to. Like if we go deep in a session and people are like, oh, can't go there today, like come back up, leave it, come back to it later.
Yeah.
It will always be that kind of place. So I don't see that shifting. What will be shifting next year is that I'm going to be teaching it. So we're going to start having other people teaching in trips. And that is incredibly hard for me, not because I don't trust other people to teach it, but because I make myself wrong for not being the person teaching it. So like that's my next growth opportunity, is to like let other people take over things for me so that I'm not so stretched.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually wrote about that recently as like a behind the scenes type of thing. So for anyone who doesn't know, I actually work very closely with the Institute. We originally jokingly started calling me the chief nurturer, and then we were all like, oh, actually, that's perfect. Let's just keep it. And so we have, so there's a lot that I get to see behind the scenes, and I've worked behind the scenes in a lot of businesses. I also have a corporate background. And I think what happens so often is that CEOs or executives a lot of times will present one way in public, especially when it comes to social media, right? They'll present a certain way in public, and then behind the scenes, it's a mess, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not the person you would expect them to be. And what I can say is 100% the person that you would expect Lee to be behind the scenes is exactly who she is. She's the same person. And so I actually wrote about this recently, about how difficult it has been for you to take a step back. And that's with you trusting all of us 100%. Like there's no question in my mind that you trust me, that you trust Sarah, that you trust Brittany, that you trust Stephanie, all of us. Like there's no question about that. And that has been such a welcomed change of pace for me, to be in a space where I feel appreciated and trusted. And even with that, right? And I said this to somebody recently. You know who it was? It was our first mentor student.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to her privately, and she was like, I think I'm going to have a really tough time when I start bringing in team, not because she's like, I'm going to bring in the most amazing people, and they're going to do great, and it has nothing to do with them. And I was like, you picked the perfect mentor, because Lee is stellar at attracting the right people for the Institute and making sure that they're in the place that feels best for them and that they're excited about what they're doing. And she trusts all of us, no question. And it has been extremely difficult for her to let go of some pieces because this is your baby, like you really, you care about this. And that's the part that I think that like, I can't stress that enough is how intentional you are when you design programs, you and Lindsay both. And I think it's so stellar that you and your sister work so well together because the programs that you have designed, especially because we were talking about trips and teacher training, because I know that happened very quickly for you as well. But the fact that you were so intentional about the way that you designed it, coming from the perspective of you went through, what did you say, like 12, 18 years?
13, 12, 13 years. Yeah.
A million years of secondary.
What is the Titanic? It was 82 years ago.
I send my husband that gift at least once a month. But coming from that perspective, and then also the perspective, because you hold both of those identities, right? Of being the student and then also being the educator. Yeah. And the fact that you didn't just replicate what you had seen and actually took the time to say, here's what worked and here's what didn't. And we don't know exactly what this looks like going forward because nobody else is fucking doing it. Yeah. And the fact that you were so right, mind blowing for me.
Well, it's funny because I've actually told this story twice in the last couple of days, and I am bragging that I've told this story because it involves me not being humble, and that is a very hard thing for me. So that's where one of my wins still is. So when I was teaching, I took over, these 3 classes in nursing school typically have some of the lowest student evaluation scores because they're hard and they suck. And, like you can only do so much. And so.
Can you share what the classes were just for?
Yeah, sure. So, advanced pathophysiology. So advanced, like what's wrong with the body. So you have to understand how the body works first and then figure out all the ways that it doesn't. And then I taught advanced pharmacology, so prescribing medications. And then I taught, so I was course head and co-course head in those 2 classes. And then the 3rd class, I was a lab instructor head for acute care nurse practitioner students in advanced health assessment. So how you go and look and examine somebody and listen to them to tell what's wrong, right? And so all of these things go together, and they're just hard courses. They're if you survive those, you're good, right? And also, you need an 80% to survive those. So you know how they make the joke of like C's get degrees? That's not how nursing school works. B's get degrees in nursing school. So like you don't have a lot of wiggle room. So these students are coming in. They are high achievers. They are perfectionists. A lot of them have been nurses for decades, and I've only been a nurse at this point for like 4 or 5 years. So they're like, I know more than you, right? So at any rate, I'm teaching from people who are 20 years older than me. So, average score on a 5-point scale is in these classes like 3.7, 3.8, you're good. Well, when I got my first evals back in each of those classes, I hit a 4.3 to a 4.5. So like that is a massive increase. And my boss called me and she's like, I need to talk to you. Which we talk about in the trauma world is like something you should not say to people who you care about. You should say like, hey, you're not in trouble and I want to discuss something with you, or like you should give them context, because I immediately had a trauma response of like, oh, cool, I'm getting fired, right?
Yeah.
Every time, am I getting fired? So she said, this is weird because you have the highest rating and also you have like the most ones out of any professor I've seen. She's like, your comments are the most there's such a dichotomy. Like people do not feel so about you. They either like 80% of the students are obsessed with you and 20% of them want you fired.
Yeah. Just so wild to me. So wild.
Well, and I think it was because when I came into those classes, I was like, look, we're not going to do this the traditional way. I said, you are prescribing in 2023. You memorizing drugs is not helpful.
Yeah.
Because unless the internet breaks, like, you know what you're. Can we keep this in here, please? My sister is just like walking around the hotel room, like making, like banging things, and I'm just staring at her, like, "Are you good?"
What's funny is that, like, I'm sure on your end it's so loud, but I literally heard a click, and then I saw Lindsay's face, like, "Oh no, I'm in trouble."
It's fine. She knows I don't care. It gets to be imperfect, but like, I was encouraging them to fail.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying, make the mistakes in here, right?
Yes.
Like, make the mistakes with me, because then you're not going to make the mistakes out there, or you're less likely. And if you make the mistakes in here, then you know how to fix them. So when you go out there and you do make a mistake out there, guess what? You know how to handle it. And so what I didn't realize I was teaching them was distress tolerance.
Yeah.
Which is something that is huge in the trauma and psychological safety realm. Well, guess what? If you are really, really dysregulated and you have not consented to somebody teaching you distress tolerance, you are going to hate them.
Yeah.
So that was where it was coming from. And what I realized in that context was, I love teaching these things, and I love teaching the 80% of people who are here for it, and like teaching these 20% of people who are just actively resistant. And that's fine. They can be resistant, but having to teach them and them having to be in that class.
Yeah.
That was distressful for me, because I would have given them to another professor if I could have, and I couldn't. So that was also why when I looked at the institute, I was really clear when people came in of like, look, I don't need you to like me all the time, but like, also, I'm gonna push you a little bit, and sometimes, like, not intentionally, I'm gonna be rude, as you say. Like, I'm gonna say things and you're gonna be like rude, right? I'm going to activate your nervous system, and part of the work in these courses is to practice distress tolerance of, wow, I really hated what she just said. Now, do I disagree with it, or do I actually really agree with it and I just don't want to look at that, or is it reminding me of something else? So I really pulled that in. And the part about academia sets you up to do everything yourself.
Mm.
You know, I didn't have a TA. I graded every single paper. I wrote every single exam. My colleague and I, we worked together, but like, I was on my own. And so having a team of 10 people now, where it's like, hey, I can give things to you. I'm going to admit something to you right now that I did last night that I don't think you know I did last night, because
oh no,
I'm trying to I'm trying to stay out of the implementation, right? I'm like, Shannon Space is the group, and our Facebook group, our free Facebook group. I'm like, I don't do things in there. But last night when I was looking, I was like, oh, I miscommunicated to Shannon, because I wanted all of the adapt. We're running this free course right now. I was like, I wanted all of the adapt things pinned at the top, and she's been pinning just that day and taking down the others. So I fixed it like the way that I had meant it, but I saw it as like, this was my mistake that I made in communicating, so I need to fix it. And after I did it, I was like, you know what I could have done is messaged Shannon and said, hey, I miscommunicated with you. Could you go do this? But I'm still working through the, like, just because it's faster for you to do it in that moment, that is going to slow you down over time.
Yeah.
So I hope you don't hate me right now, but like, I wanted to admit that, because that's, you're talking about the, how do you let team do things? It's not that I don't trust y'all. It's that I go, oh, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
I need to clean it up, instead of going, hey, I made a mistake in communicating this to you. Can you clean it up?
Yeah, there's so much that we could dig into with that too, that I'm like, okay, this is why I only had 2 questions set, because I knew we were going to do this.
Yeah.
That is part of and it's funny that Sarah is also on our team, and her whole bag is like corporate rehab, right? Because we're all, in a way, whether it's academia, whether it's corporate, most of us came from some sort of very strict, stringent background where it's like, you don't make mistakes. If you do, you clean it up as fast as possible and hope that nobody ever sees it, because you might get fired, right? Or like the world ends. And it's that kind of tense feeling that we're all that's traumatizing in and of itself, right? And we're still working that out of our bodies in a lot of ways. And it is you were talking before I think it was before we started recording about like how different you and I are at present, where it's like, you can read something one time and be like, okay, I'm ready. Because you're so used to being on the spot. And I'm like, that's my nightmare. And what you said was, this is years and years of training, right? So we're so new in the grand scheme, because the vision that I see for the Institute is like, until we die, right? Like, this is not.
I'm going to be like in my deathbed, like, one more thing. Just
right.
Yeah.
Literally, she's going to be just like launching a new course. Hey, Sarah, I came up with this new idea while I was sitting here because I literally couldn't do anything on my deathbed, and I designed a new course. So can you make that happen?
That's like, it's morbid and accurate. Yes.
Right. And two things are true.
Yeah.
So it's really funny because it's like, I think that's one of the best things is like if you hadn't told me that just now and I would have gone into the group and seen that done, I immediately would have been like, oh no, I fucked up. Do you know what I mean? And so on your end, you're like, oh, I messed up. I'm just fixing my mistake. But then if I go in and see that and there's no communication around it, I'm like, oh no, I did the wrong thing. Right.
Exactly. And that's why I was like, I actually meant to tell you that before we started, and then I got distracted. And so I was like, oh, this is perfect. I get to tell her on the podcast, although maybe she'll be mad at me afterwards for saying it on the podcast. There's so much of our own stuff that we bring in. And that's actually what I really appreciate about with our team, because we're really good at being like, hey, I'm going to use this term, and it's not trauma informed, but like, I'm being sarcastic. Like, am I the asshole here? Like, am I the drama? Right.
Yeah.
Because, and we're saying that not from like, I'm being mean to myself, but like, is this a me thing? Is this a me thing? Or is this maybe actually we need to have a conversation about how we are doing this?
Right.
And I think that we are all we're getting better and better at that. And I think our team, if you look at our team compared to other people's teams, are like, we're way better at it than others. Like we're very honest with each other. We're very vulnerable with each other. We're very transparent. And that's honestly been a hard thing for me as the leader, because, and it's so fascinating because at this academic conference, they keep talking about the thing that helps your students learn the most is you being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that is a stark contrast to how we are all taught how to show up.
Yeah.
You're taught to show up as a leader and not be vulnerable, right? Like I'm the strong one. I'm the one who's fine. I'm brave. I'm courageous. I'm this. I'm that. I'm not scared. Everything's okay. And every time we have our monthly team call, I get off of it and I'm like, this is what I'm great at. Because these people have to hate working for me. Like I was such a squirrel. Like that was such an awful call. And the hilarious part of this is that my husband is on these calls because he works with us.
Yeah.
And so he knows my brain is going to do this every single time. And so he's like, hey, what's your brain saying? And I'm like, that I should not be the leader of an institute. He's like, cool.
He's everything down.
Yeah. That I should be more professional, right? And he's like, great, let's go get some ice cream, or like, let's go do this. Like he just acknowledges it. He practices attunement, which is a big thing at the Institute. And for those who don't know what attunement is, I'm going to give you my undivided attention and I'm going to give you my unconditional acceptance. So he holds that space for me while I have that squirrel moment. And he's like, great, let's go. Like, cool, I accept that. Now, we both know that's not true. So like, let's go just do something else. And I'm like, okay, right?
Yeah.
It's really helpful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the most important things that's actually, I'm feeling all kinds of things in my body saying that, because I'm like, oh no, there's no hierarchy of like most important things I've learned throughout this whole process. Like I can't even. But I think the process of just calling a thing, right? And also having that degree of separation of like, okay, here's what my brain is telling me. Now, what is the truth? Right. And I do think it's great for people to hear that that's what you go through daily, right? Because I do think that if people were to just see you on social media, right, and see, like, if they were just to hear your list of accolades, right, that could be really intimidating for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I've always been in a space with you where I haven't had the opportunity to be intimidated by you, because the second that you talk to Lee one-on-one, she does a really beautiful job of just meeting people where they are, period. There's no pomp and circumstance with Lee at all, ever. And so it's like, if you just meet her without those accolades, then you wouldn't expect her to be so accomplished, right? But if you hear an introduction of Lee without knowing Lee, then I could see how that would be really intimidating. So to hear from the perspective of the person who doesn't know you and is just hearing who you are for the first time, to hear that, like, oh, this is this person who has done all of this incredible shit in her life, and her brain still says silly shit all of the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's super important for people to hear, because I don't think it fully goes away, right? Ever. It just gets faster to move through it, right? And it's super helpful to have humans around you, because one of the things that we have seen, just for a bit more context, we've seen massive growth with everything to do with the Institute over the last several months. Our Facebook group has tripled since I started working there, just about. Our social media, just everywhere, has blown up. You've gone viral and mini viral a dozen times at this point. And the theme that I keep seeing from people is, all of these things that you're saying sound nice, but I don't have people around me that treat me that way, that hold space for me that way. And I'm like, that's so hard, because that really is such a privilege that I think once you are in spaces like ours, and that is sort of, I don't want to say all encompassing, because we all have lives outside of this, but once you get used to that sort of treatment, it becomes expected, right? You just expect that people would be kind and attuned, like truly kind, right? Not nice. It's not the same thing, but truly kind and attuned. And one thing that I want to say really quickly, that I'm not like a paper person. I don't write things down a lot, but I have like 2 notes that sit right next to my desk. One is telling me which way to turn my labels if I need to print a shipping label, because I never get it right. And the other one is attunement equals undivided attention and unconditional acceptance, because the first time that I heard you say that a year and a half ago, it blew my fucking mind.
Yeah.
And I think that we're so privileged in that we get that from each other, right? Every member of our team gets that. You get that with your husband. We are practicing that with our children. I think we all try to be really intentional about like understanding where the rest of the world is. And when you get used to that and you expect it, I think that it could be really easy for us to forget that that's not the experience of most people.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you're saying this. This is a distinction that has been becoming really clear to me, because my husband and I didn't always have attunement. My kids and I didn't always have attunement. I didn't have attunement with my parents. I didn't practice attunement. I couldn't. I was so anxious all of the time. And people, I gave a talk on anxiety a couple of years ago at Cardinal Health, it's like 1,000 people. And I'm up there, and at the end, I had so many people come up to me and say, I am so grateful you talked about your experience with anxiety, because looking at you, I would have never expected you are somebody who had panic attacks for 25 years.
Right.
So I know what it's like to not have attunement. And I've seen just the straight up magic of just taking a second to see people. It's magic. And the reason it's magic is not because it's magic. Like, that is what we are supposed to, like, that is what we are designed to do as humans. It's just that our world has become so distracting that it is so hard to actually just stop and pay attention to something.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this book. I'm almost done. It was so hard for me to leave it at the house because I had 2 chapters left. And I was like, I could just take it. And I was like, no, you have a process. Leave it at the house, because you're not going to have time for it. And the book's called I Didn't Do the Thing Today. And it's about letting go of productivity guilt. But in one of the chapters, she's talking about the word attention, and the word attention means to stretch toward. Like if you break that word down, it's saying you are stretching towards something. And so that is what I'm really starting to think about is if I'm in a conversation with somebody, but my body is stretching toward the door, my brain is stretching toward what's happening next. Like I need to pause for a second and focus and come back to stretching towards this person.
Yeah.
Or stretching towards myself sometimes because I need attention, right? So we are doing this 5-day free adapt event where, part of what came out of this huge rapid growth on social media and in our community is we had a lot of people who knew nothing about trauma and nothing about recovery. And so we are creating this intro course that I teach live. I teach best live. And so I was like, let's offer it for free and do it over 5 days. And then we'll take it, we'll package it up, we'll sell it for like $19, have it be very accessible. So yesterday was day 3, and I was talking about the process we use to come out of dysregulation, like being kind of stuck and frozen and hypo aroused, or like in this flight fight state of hyper arousal. And I was telling a story about when my husband and I met and how I didn't know he was practicing attunement, but he was practicing attunement. And we got a couple comments during that story as I was sharing it. I'm like, I have nobody in my life that has ever met me and seen me and heard me like that. And, I work with clients one-on-one, and we'll do like deep dive weekends where I spend 14 hours with them, like going through all their stuff. And the theme that just comes out over and over and over is I wasn't seen, I wasn't heard, I wasn't validated, my needs weren't met. That's it. And so I think yes, we talk a lot about neuroscience and psychology and animal behavior and education and and leadership and power and all of those things in our space. But if you boil down what we're teaching people, we're showing them where they haven't been seen, where they haven't been heard, where they weren't validated, where their needs weren't met. And then we're showing them this is how you see and hear and validate and meet your own needs. And this is how you see and hear and validate and meet other people's needs. That's it.
Yeah.
There you go. That is the secret, quote unquote, to what we are doing. And the reason that it is working so well is because I don't see anybody else doing it.
Yeah. Well, and we're practicing all of the things that we're teaching.
Yes.
Even down to, I don't know if everyone listening knows this, but I work as a contractor for the Institute.
Mm-hmm.
The Institute pays me a solid wage to do the work that I do for the Institute. And the bulk of the work that I do for the Institute is for people who have never paid the Institute anything.
Yeah.
And with that, my main focus as the chief nurturer of the Institute is to make sure that everyone who comes into our spaces, and we are diligent, we want to capture every single person. We want to make sure that everybody who comes through the doors, anywhere that they come through the doors, even if it's like a side door or a back, we go out of our way to make sure that every person who comes through feels seen and supported in whatever way that looks like for them, right? And obviously there's capacity issues. Everybody's coming with their own baggage. Sounds negative, but everybody has their own
past painful experiences. We call them the PPEs, which I actually love because in the healthcare field, your PPE is your personal protective equipment, but in our space, it's past painful experience.
Which, if you really think about it, it's like that's accurate.
Right?
Like your personal protective equipment, right? Like these are the things that you have put on to protect yourself from your past painful experiences. So,
you're like, oh, this thing might be dangerous based on what I've learned in the past. So let me protect myself. It's the same thing.
Right. And so the thing that I've noticed, and I love this because my personality is perfect for it, honestly, is like I really focused on the long game because I know that we have I think, 1,600 people in the Facebook group right now.
Mhm.
And we have maybe 10 people a day actively, not the same 10 people, but 10 people a day actively engaging in what is going on in the group, sometimes 20, right? Like especially during an event, we have tons more people interacting and engaging. But during a non-event week, there's not a ton of engagement there. And I know that a big part of that is that people don't feel safe there yet, right? And it's not,
they're new.
Right. They have never experienced a space where we say, you're welcome to post anything you want here, right? And there's criteria for what that looks like to make sure that everyone else in the group also feels safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we say, hey, we want you to make a post and introduce yourself, and like in whatever way feels good for you, if that feels safe for you, we actually mean that, right? When I say, hey, if I missed something, or if you're not sure what to do, or you need more guidance, tag me in. I really mean that shit. I really mean it, right? And it takes a while to get used to that, right? It's not that somebody shows up with care and attunement one time and you're like, oh, I'm safe now, right? A lot of times, for most of us, we have to see that play out over and over and over again in order to feel safe, because we have all this confirmation bias that is just waiting to happen, right? We're just waiting. I'm sure people are coming through the doors at the Institute to some degree, just waiting for us to prove that we're not who we say we are.
Confirm their worst fear.
Right.
Yes. And we've seen that. So there's this phenomenon, is that what I want to use? I don't know. I can't think of the word right now, but it's called the double down. And I know you know this, but like I said it like you don't know what this is, but for everyone listening, it's called the double down. And the double down is when somebody who has a lot of past painful experiences comes into a space where they are going to be seen, they are going to be heard, they are going to be validated, they're going to be met, they're going to be treated as a human, they're going to be given second, third, fourth chances. Like, if that feels foreign to you, it's actually going to activate your nervous system, and your nervous system is going to say, hey, let's test this.
Yep.
Because we need to see, are they going to practice what they're preaching?
Mm-hmm.
Kids do this, right? Yeah. My kids do this all the time.
Which, by the way, just side note, we love that.
Yeah.
We love it.
Do. I have now looked at that as such a gift.
Yeah.
Because if you're testing me, what that tells me is that we're actually creating the space for you to test us. And that is a sign that we are like doing what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So when people do participate in the double down, and then we meet them again with what I call firm, kind boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? The thing about attunement is we're not saying that your behavior it's not harmful. We're not saying that like we agree with your opinion. We're not saying anything like that. What we're saying is I see you, right? I can be curious about why you're saying what you're saying. I can be understanding of how somebody with your past trauma could say what you just said. When you test me, I can lean in.
Yeah.
And give you more attention and say, like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right?
Tell me more. We say that a lot. Tell me more.
Tell me more. And it's weird. I've been almost in tears this entire time because I'm just like really having a lot of reflection around just how beautiful what we've created is. That moment where somebody who has had to fight in every space they're in, or they have had to they've been rejected from every space they've tried to join. That moment when their nervous system is like, oh, Lee and Shannon and the Institute, like these people are not going to do what every other person in my life has ever done.
Yeah.
Has always done. I had that moment with a client. I host retreats every now and then. And I had that moment with a client that, this person had been rejected and kicked out of like a lot of spaces. And they were just coming with massive fight energy. And I just stood there in the kitchen and I looked at them and I was like, you can fight me as much as you need to until you don't feel like you need to fight me.
Yep.
And if you say something that crosses a boundary or you do something that crosses one of my boundaries, I'll let you know.
Yep.
But until then, you fight. You fight until you don't need to fight anymore because you don't scare me.
Yeah.
And when I said that "you don't scare me" to her whole body just like,
Yeah.
and that relaxation is like, oh, okay, this is actually a space I can be vulnerable. This is a space I can be myself. And to watch that human and other humans who've had that experience, their transformation, honestly, it's kind of like I get a little bit of twisted pleasure out of it because I want to just take their results. Like I want to just take their transformations and this is the petty part of me, right? Like, because again, I'm a human. I've got some good pettiness inside of me and I want to take it to other people and be like, do you see what you could have had?
Yeah.
And not from a place of well, there is a part of me that again, I'm human and have human emotions, like that wants to do it from like a proving place. But there's another place of me that I'll call it the altruistic side, right? That I want to take that to people and be like, look, are you tired of kicking people out of your program? Are you tired of having to protect yourself from these things? Are you tired of creating such strict boundaries that like people can't move, including you? It's just a really beautiful thing to see when people double down and we go, you don't scare me. And also like, what do you mean? What's going on?
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Well, and one thing I want to clarify too, because I think I understand where you're coming from, and I think it's a place where there could be some confusion. So I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
So when you're saying like you want to take those results and almost bring them to other people and be like, look what you could have had. Yeah. What I'm hearing is that you're talking about taking it to other service providers and other facilitators and being like, look at this incredible human.
Yeah.
And like, instead of kicking humans out, what if you just spent a little more time digging in, right? What if So
and I appreciate you clarifying it too, because as I was saying it, I was like, the reason I do the work that I do is because I've been abandoned and I've been rejected and I've had these experiences where people have been like, oh, you were vulnerable with me? Bye. Right. And so, you know, a lot of us start businesses from that place of this is where my pain was. So let me go make sure nobody else experiences this pain. And so there is that like very inner teen version of me that wants to go take it to other people and be like, I get to have this human in my space now because you didn't. And also, I want to share that kind of like darker, twistier side of it because I don't do that, right? Like I don't do that. But I also recognize that means so much to me because I'm getting to help people and support people and be attuned with people in a way that I didn't get and that I know a lot of other people didn't get. And so it is such a privilege and it is such an honor and it is so enjoyable to be able to create that space for somebody and be like, okay, they've got it.
I think what you said about so many of us start our businesses or pour into our passions from a place of this is a thing. And I'm noticing a theme now of like, what was the need that wasn't met, right? And we've all had our own past painful experiences, either in our businesses and education and personal relationships. And oftentimes, whatever the thing is that was most impactful, either is the place where we shut down and completely shut it off, or we focus on it so much that it becomes the new thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of power. There's power in both of those situations. Don't mishear what I'm saying. I'm not saying that if you need to shut off a part of yourself, survival mode, that's powerful too. That's your brain, that's your body protecting you. And there's also power in, it's a bit of alchemy, right? Of here's what I've been through. And I was able to turn that into this really beautiful thing that now has far surpassed me. Yeah. Because essentially that's what the Institute is, right? And as hard as it is you're not pulling yourself out of it. You're just allowing it to grow around you and allowing other people in, right? Because we say a lot of times, like for you specifically, Lee, oh, I've got to remove myself from some of these spaces, or I've got to back out of some of these spaces. Yeah. And what is actually happening, when I'm actually seeing, is I'm almost I'm almost picturing you're like a big oak, right? Like you're grounded and you've planted these roots and there's all of this beautiful, lush greenery growing up around you, right? Like that's us. And then me and Sarah and the rest of the team, we're going to grow into those oak trees as well, right? And then more trees start to grow up around us. And that's the goal, right? That's the mission, that's the vision. And so I think that the Institute started as a way to make sure that other people don't have to continue experiencing all of the hard that you did. And it's so much more on top of that.
Yeah. And this is beautiful because I know we were going to like talk about offers at the end of this and some of the cool things that we're doing. And, you know, we talked about adapt and that's one of the pieces. And the other big piece of things that are starting soon, very soon when that comes out, is our business collective. And you're in the business collective, and you know it's a quarterly thing that we do, that we open each quarter, and we take people through 12, 13 weeks of looking at your business from this trauma sensitive perspective. And you know, talking about that, so many of us start our businesses from a place of either like, okay, I'm gonna cut this piece or part of myself off and then I'm gonna go focus over here. Or we go, oh, this is where like I experienced pain. And so I want to start a business where I help other people never have that pain, or I help alleviate that pain. And one of the really interesting things that's happened in the collective, and something that's happened for me as I've grown the Institute, is realizing that in order for me to, and this is when the Institute like really took off, is when I started going, hey, I gotta give myself attunement first. I got to see myself and hear myself and validate myself and love myself and meet my own needs first. Because if I am running a business from a place of like giving my clients what I never got, guess what? I get resentful of my clients. I get burned out. I get tired. I get envious. And when I really stopped and said, like, what do I need? Like, let me nourish my own dang tree first. And I know that we talk about this a lot, but like, we talk a lot about it in terms of, I think, physical health and mental health, emotional health. We don't talk about it a lot in business. The clients that we have in our business collective that have gone through, because we've been doing this since last August, almost a year. The clients who have been with us in that time frame, I have watched them figure out how to attune to themselves and their businesses. Like some people started entirely new businesses. Some people like were like, oh, I'm not a coach, I'm a healer, right? And they've gone in a different direction. Other people just realized like my business does so much better when I actually take care of myself.
Yeah.
And so that is, if you listen to this and you're like, man, attunement sounds amazing. And also I'd like to practice that in a space as an entrepreneur with other entrepreneurs who are doing that too. Just an invitation to consider joining the collective, because that is a place. We have entrepreneurs who come in that are like, I've never been in a space like this before. This is the weirdest thing. They're like, I haven't talked about business for the last 6 calls. I'm like, yeah, it didn't look like it, but you did.
Yeah. Okay. So something that you just said when you were talking about the business collective, you were talking about people sort of picking their pursuits based on, and this isn't the case 100% of the time, but a lot of times we pick what we want to do in the world, like what our place in the world is based on experiences that we've had that we don't want other people to have to experience.
Yeah.
And something that clicked for me was, I think there is a danger there in choosing a thing too quickly without first identifying whether you're okay in that space. And you sort of started to dig into that a little bit because you were like, yeah, I've got to practice attunement with myself. I've got to take the time to make sure that my needs are met, that I'm okay first, right? Because I do see this happening a lot. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but I've seen this a lot in the business collective space, the trauma sensitive business collective, where folks do tend to change what they're doing. And there's nothing wrong with them changing. I think that happens because they recognize that maybe the thing that they picked wasn't coming from a pure place, or it wasn't coming from a place of, oh, this is what I actually want to do. But in a lot of cases, and I know this is true for me as well, and that's part of where I think I might be shifting my business soon, is that I wanted to help people with finances because things were so hard for me growing up, right?
Yeah.
That's where, for me, when I started my business, it was like, just for a little bit more context for anybody who is maybe listening on Lee's podcast and not mine, I had a very tumultuous childhood. There was a lot of instability in a lot of places, and finance was one of the main places that sort of, if you've ever been poor, you know that spills over into everything, right? It's very difficult to be successful in your romantic relationships, in school, in your job, when there's this overarching theme of, I don't have the money to pay the power bill, or I might not be able to eat. And then that's compounded if you are a parent in that scenario, which thankfully I never have been as an adult, but that was my mom's experience, right? And so my passion for finance grew out of that place, right? And I think something that just clicked for me right now when you were talking is maybe part of the reason that I'm not feeling that same drive and passion toward that anymore. It's not because I don't love the work, and it's not because I don't love the humans I serve, but it's maybe at least in part because when I chose that path, it was from a place of, well, here's the note that I wrote down. Is it coming from a healed place or a place of trying to heal others in order to help heal yourself?
Oh, buddy.
So at least part of why I chose my path was maybe there was a little bit of compensation in there, right? Of this will help heal me if I can help others either avoid that or heal from what I went through.
You just spoke a whole word in a very succinct way, which I love, because I would have loved it if you talked about it for 20 minutes. But this is a hard conversation to have, and I'm actually glad it's coming like deeper in after people have listened to the rest of this. Because, you know, when I said that piece that you clarified around of like, there's this part of me that wants to go to other people and be like, look, right there, I can still see some places that my pain affects my business.
Yeah.
And I don't make myself wrong for that. I don't make myself wrong for that, because I don't make myself wrong for thought. What I do is make sure that the actions that I take based off of the thoughts that I have are actions that I'm actually going to in the future be like, yeah, I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
Whether it works or not, I'm glad that I tried that. Right.
Yeah.
And part of that is some really deep regulation work. And so I think you get to look at it from such an individual place, because the thing of it is that our traumas and our pain can really lead us to our purpose. And if it's like what you said, if I am still in pain and using my business in an attempt to try to soothe that pain, versus I have done the work to like really heal that pain, and I'm coming at it from a place of, instead of like it's scabbed over, like it's scarred. There's a remembrance of what happened to me, and also there is not a dysregulation around it. It doesn't still actively hurt. You know the difference between when you can remember how something hurt and then you're actually hurting?
Yeah. It's like, I think about childbirth a lot, right? Because there's lots of things that happen in your brain and your body that are designed beautifully to make us continue wanting to have children. Because if we actively remembered that pain, nobody would do it. Nobody would get pregnant again. Nobody would go through the birthing process again if we actively, not nobody, but like most people, if you were actively still feeling that, you would be like, no, there's no way. Because I remember immediately after having both of my kids, I was like, nope, never again, never again. And luckily for me, I guess, because I think it all works out beautifully, but I was in so much physical pain for so long after having my daughter that stuck with me longer, to the point that my husband and I had always planned on having more kids, but I haven't told a lot of people this, but we accidentally got pregnant with Jack. And had it not been for that, I don't know that, like, I wouldn't have consciously made that decision.
Sure.
And he came 4 years after Greenlee. And it was because I was in such physical pain and mental anguish for so long after having her, that at the 4-year mark, I wasn't still actively feeling that. And that had such an impact on me that I was like, I don't actively remember what that feels like. And I know it was so bad that I don't want to do it again.
Yeah.
And then luckily for me, and this, I just want to add this asterisk in there, that if you had a really bad pregnancy and bad birth, just know that, like, one pregnancy and one birth is one pregnancy and one birth, because my pregnancy and birth with Jack was what I always expected and wanted pregnancy to be like. It was such a beautiful experience for me. I know we're going way off topic, and it's
no, we're not, though, because I mean, there's so many parallels here between, birth and a baby and birth and a business.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many parallels there. And the thing about babies and the difference between babies and business is that you get pregnant, you grow the baby, you birth the baby, and then, like, yes, you spend the rest of the time, 18 plus years, ideally, taking care of that baby and nurturing that baby and fostering that baby. And business is a little different, though, because, I don't know about you, but I now have thousands of babies. Like, my programs could be looked at as babies. The businesses themselves could be looked at as babies. The humans inside the businesses could be looked at as babies. Like, there's a lot. And if you've had some past painful experiences in any one of those areas and you have not healed from that, right? We talk about trauma as residue. If there's residue of past pain or past hurt that you haven't processed and made meaning out of, and it's not scarred, if I still talk about it, it rips the scab off and you're bleeding again. I'm not saying that as business owners or even as parents that we shouldn't have children or we shouldn't start businesses if we have places that are scabbed. The Institute was started when there were still some big scabby wounds that I had. So you can recover and heal in the process of doing the thing.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people don't talk about that. They're like, you have to heal first and then do the thing. And I'm like, no, ideally you're healing while you're doing the thing, because
if you do nothing, then you're not healing. You don't have the opportunity to heal.
Exactly.
And I love that you're saying that too, because it's not a linear process, right? You don't go through a set of steps and then you're at the end, right? You're constantly learning, you're constantly growing. There's healing happening all the time. And something that you said earlier, you didn't say exactly this, but essentially you were saying, I think it comes down to individual decisions, right?
Yeah.
It's not always, okay, here's the big vision and here's every decision within that. It sometimes comes down to minute, what is the decision that needs to be made? And I think this is kind of what you said was right or wrong. Is this a decision no matter how it turns out, right? It could create an entire shitstorm. And am I going to be able to look back at this decision that I've made and feel good about it later, right? In this moment, is this the best decision based on the information that I have, based on how it feels in my body, based on my values, based on, what I want for my life? Is this a decision I can feel good about later, regardless of the outcome?
And here's the important thing, coming back to that metaphor of scabbed versus scarred, right? I'm a nurse practitioner, so thinking about how psychological trauma and psychological wounds, they feel the same to us when we are being psychologically threatened versus physically threatened. It feels the same in our body.
Yeah.
So,
say that again.
When you feel psychologically threatened, the threat of loss of love, safety, belonging, attention, connection is there versus the threat of bodily harm is there. They feel the same in your body. Your body's like, dude, we're dying, right? It hurts. But psychological wounds you can't see, physical wounds you can't. So if you imagined, I'm starting this business or I'm making this decision while I am actively bleeding, while I am actively hurt, the likelihood that decision is going to, like you're going to make a different decision than if you stopped for a minute and were like, where am I bleeding? What's hurting? What needs bandaged? What needs healed a little bit more before I move forward? And when you are actively hurt, and when I say actively, by the way, y'all, it could have been years ago. You're still actively hurting.
And you may not even know it. That's the tricky part.
You may not even know it. That is the tricky part, because if you are actively hurting, your body is in a state of arousal that it is not in when you are not actively hurting. And so your body is saying, hey, make decisions out of urgency. We call it triage, right? Go through and figure out what needs handled right now.
Yeah.
And handle everything that looks like an emergency right now. And as business owners, that is a really, really bad place to be operating from. Because if I am making decisions based on what is going to help me right now versus I have taken care of all of the truly urgent things, and now I can have some space to go, okay, what needs handled next? And also, how can I handle it, or how can I make a decision around this in a way that future me is not going to be pissed at current me? Because it's going to just fundamentally change the way you run your business. And this has been something that has been I've noticed this as I have healed some of those wounded places and noticed them and tended to them and bandaged them, and they've started starting over, is when I have an idea pop up in my head, I don't immediately go, oh, that's fun, let's run with it, like I used to. Now it's, okay, let's wait for a second. Let me run this by Sarah. Let me run this by Sarah's our operations director. Let me run this by TLC, my husband. And by the way, y'all, I'm not thinking about this for a really long time. It's usually 20 minutes, an hour. As I move fast, I have had conversations with my future self now enough to know when she's like, yeah, do that. But there's that pause to think about how's future Lee going to feel about this? This morning, I'm exhausted. I'm just gonna be honest with y'all. I am really depleted. I talk about business from an absorb and a squeeze. I'm a sponge, and I go through periods of absorbing and squeezing. And this week has been a squeeze week where I am squeezing a lot. And this morning I woke up and I was like, okay, maybe I'm just gonna message Shannon and tell her I don't want you to podcast, or maybe I can cancel this call, or maybe I can cancel this call, because I have 8 straight hours of calls or podcast recording online. And then I'm going to the airport, renting a car, and driving 2.5 hours to go have a deep dive day with one of my clients tomorrow for 8 hours. I'm tired. And what I was able to do was go, okay, triage. What do you need? First of all, what's bleeding? Okay, I need some water. I need some coffee. I need a shower. I never shower in the morning. I was like, get a shower. I need to pack my suitcase. I need to do all these things. Once all those things are done, then I'm going to ask myself what I want to cancel, if anything. And by that point, I'd woken up and taken my meds and had some caffeine and had some water and gotten clean and gotten prepped. And I was like, okay, I'm tired and this sucks. And also I can do this and I want to do this. This is what I want to do. Future me is going to be so happy when I get to that hotel room tonight and I can just, because if you can't see me on camera, but I just laid out, starfish, yeah. Right? And being able to make choices from that space is so much easier now that I have actively healed all of those really deep wounds. Or even when I say something on a podcast like this and I hear myself say that, I'm like, oh, that's a little bit of my inner teen coming out. Not making myself wrong for that, but also I'm not going to act on it.
Yeah. Well, and I think the important thing to pull out of that, there's a lot of important things, but one thing that I want people to hear is it takes Lee 20 minutes to sit on an idea and know that it's it's the right thing for her now because this has been an active practice of her for years. This is like at the beginning of it, if you need to sit with something for 2 days or a week or a month
or a year, like do it. Like give your, once you get to know yourself better, when those wounds are more scarred over, you will know how long you need. And there's other places. I'm so glad you said this, because before Adapt came, right? Adapt was a decision that was made in like 5 seconds on a call.
It happened in real time on a team meeting, and we all were like, okay, we're doing this. Like it literally was birthed out of thin air and put the pieces together.
Yes. But before that, we were going through a really hard stretch. Financially, emotionally, mentally, like everything was hard. And I, as the leader, kept coming to you guys and being like, or y'all, and being like, I will let you know if things really get bad and we're okay. And also things are hard. You know, I don't like the word okay. Like we are steady, and I will let you know if things, start going off the rails more. And the message I just kept getting internally was, wait. You don't know the answer yet. And every time I'd be like, well, maybe this, and my future self is like, nope, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. And I was so fucking frustrated because I wanted to move. I wanted to take action, and I had to keep reminding myself, you waiting is you taking action. And for somebody like me who's very fast paced and like does, I do move really quickly, that was so hard. And TLC is, we've been together for 2 decades almost at this point. He's watched me a really long time, and he's like, I can just see the level of growth in you, because your capacity to handle the distress of waiting is so high now. Even when things are like, they look really scary around you, you are able to sit in that discomfort. And he's like, I wish people could watch you. I wish people could like be in our house and watch you, because I think that would be a masterclass on distress tolerance.
What's so
babe.
No, I love your interactions, yours and TLC's interactions. And for those who don't know, Lee that we're talking to right now and her husband Lee, outward personality wise, seem very different. This Lee is very outgoing, can talk for hours on end about something that she's passionate about, and TLC, he comes across a lot more reserved in most cases. And it's so precious to me to watch those interactions with you play out in real time, because you guys are a really beautiful example of what can happen when you pour into a partnership. That's why I think it was so hard for those of us who have seen this journey sort of play out with the two of you and with your relationship. This is not where I was planning to go with this, but I
love it. I know where you're going, and I'm here for it.
I wanted to touch on it a bit, and I don't want to keep beating this. That's not trauma-informed language, but the saying is beat a dead horse. I don't want to keep going down this road and giving it more air than it deserves, but I think this is what was so hard for the people who have experienced you two in real life and in high stress situations and in business operations and in running a trauma institute, right? People who have experienced you all in real life. I think it was so hard for us to watch a few weeks ago as there were strangers on the internet attacking mostly him, right? If we're being fair, mostly attacking him and also attacking you for outwardly loving him and attacking your relationship and saying really harmful things. I'm not just going to say hurtful here, because
they were harmful.
Hurt is the obvious part, right? Like the things that they were saying were obviously hurtful. And they were harmful because they were making accusations of abuse. We'll definitely need to put there's always trigger warnings on all of our, but they were making accusations of psychological and physical abuse.
Yeah.
And I need to applaud our team for not like throwing bows because we all wanted to. Like, and that's,
I was like, go to bed.
I know. Well, and I think that speaks to what you were talking about before of like having the thought, having the feeling, having the emotion, and not needing to act on that, right? Because we all took the time to take a step back and say, what's the best thing here? Like, what is the best possible action for us here? And ultimately it was identifying, okay, these are hurt humans. They're bringing their past painful experiences to this. They are attaching meaning to a situation that doesn't mean what they think it means, right? They're taking a snippet of something that happened and attaching that to an experience that they've had that looks like that, right? And recognizing that, right? Coming at that from a place of compassion and curiosity, which is what we all lead with, we were all able to take a step back and say, you know what, we're actually not gonna add fuel to the fire. That's not helpful for anyone in this situation. What we did do, right, what you did beautifully was set a boundary of, hey, here's what I am gonna address, here's what I'm not, and what we're not gonna do is, I think that was my favorite moment. I told my husband, I was like, Spicy Lee showed up a little bit because she was like, all, calm and reserved. And then what we're not going to do is, and I was, there she is. Because at the end of the day, that's your human. You know what I mean? Like, that is your partner. That is your provider. And you both provide for each other in different ways. And I think that was the thing that got missed. So I said all of that to say, I think it's really special to watch your interactions play out because you do both support each other so beautifully in so many ways. And it has come from almost 2 decades of trying and listening and getting it wrong a lot of times, right? Because that's the part that people don't see that you are very transparent about, is that you've both gotten it wrong a lot.
Yeah.
In order to get to the place that you are.
This trip has really highlighted something for me because every morning I've woken up to a text from my husband saying, "Hey babe, how are you?" Right? I normally get up with our kids. He's not a morning person. Like, he's just not. I get up with the kids. He like stumbles. We sleep in separate bedrooms because it's glorious. We have the privilege of having separate bedrooms. I have a bedroom and an office like combined, and he has a bedroom and an office combined, instead of having our bedroom and an office. And
that's so brilliant.
Oh my gosh, so nice. We both sleep like babies. It's great because we have very different schedules. I'm a morning person. He's a late night owl, and so he's had to totally shift his schedule because it's the last week for our kids of school. And so other trips, like before did the work that we did, I would be like, are you up? Are you awake? Are you this? Like, I would be so worried about what's going on at home. And in the last like year and a half, 2 years of work that we've done, where I have really recognized how much my own hyper independence was really crippling his ability to be the man he wanted to be. Right? He's texting me every morning before I wake up. "Hey, just wanted to let you know, kids are off to school. This happened. I'm taking the dog for a walk, and then I'm going to work out, and then I'm going to do this." And he's checking in with me throughout the day and going, "Hey," because he can see my calendar. He's like, "How did that talk go? How are you doing? What do you need?" Right? Like, "Are you drinking water? Did you eat?" And he's not doing it from a place of like, he's doing it from a place of provision. Because he knows me. He knows I will go 8 hours without eating. He knows that if I'm busy, that I won't drink water. Like, he knows these things. And every single thing with our kids has been handled. So what cracked me up, like what just made me laugh, is when I was praising and just saying, like being not even praising, but just appreciating and being grateful and reflecting on the fact that I used to have a relationship where I felt like I had to handle everything and I carried the mental load and all of these things. And now I'm in a relationship that truly feels like equitable, where I feel relaxed and safe and taken care of. And I'm like not even asking if he's taking care of things because I know he's taking care of things. A lot of the humans who came onto our page when I was sharing something similar to this were like, oh, way to praise him for doing the bare minimum. Like this is what all men should be doing. Like this is what all partners should be doing. Why are we giving him credit for like just showing up and like doing what all of us are supposed to do all the time? I said, here's something that I've learned. If you want somebody to change their behavior, and when they change their behavior, you go, finally. Or like, well, that's what you should have been doing the entire time.
Right.
That does not make somebody want to perpetuate that changed behavior, right? If you use negative reinforcement for a positive behavior, they will stop doing the positive behavior. That's how mammals work.
Yeah, that's all mammals. Literally, that's
all mammals. And so I realized that these people were not open to that type of conversation or that type of feedback. But the other piece, and this is something that's always been really helpful for me, is if somebody is criticizing me, that is unsolicited advice.
Yep.
Criticism is unsolicited advice. And when people give me unsolicited advice, I need to look at what results does this person have around what they are advising me in, and would I want those results? And so I'm looking at these people and I'm like, they are divorced, they are unhappy, they are not in relationships, they have sworn off marriage, they are talking about how much they think men are trash. And I am over here in a relationship with a partner that we have been together for 20 years, and I am more attracted, more in love. We have deeper intimacy than ever before. And it just keeps getting better and better and better. So who should be taking advice from whom?
Well, and the thing is that it's maybe neither, right? Maybe
right, exactly.
Because the thing is that if they are content with being divorced, with not being in a relationship,
exactly,
then that's fine also, right? There's nothing wrong with either of those scenarios. But what I'm hearing from you is, if what I desire to have is an equal partnership, a loving relationship, a partner who cares for me and is attuned to me and takes care of our children without me having to ask to, and the list goes on and on and on. Yeah. If that's what I desire to have and that's what I have, then we're good, right? And
exactly.
If that's not what they desire to have, then they don't need to take advice from you either, right?
Exactly. And that's why I was also like, I'm not going to give these people advice back of like, oh, but if you just did this, your thing would be so much better. Like, it wasn't that. And that was the whole interesting thing about the post was I was talking about how I made very specific changes in how I was communicating to my husband. And I stopped using negative reinforcement to try to get positive behavior.
Yeah.
And I gave him space to breathe.
Yeah.
Because he did not have that with the way I was communicating. And I said, if you would like to hear about how I did that, you can do like, and that was the invitation. It wasn't all women should be doing this. Like, it was a very heteronormative conversation. It was a very specific conversation. And I wasn't saying this is how everyone on the planet should be doing. And I will never say that. I will never say this is how every human on the planet should have a relationship or parent or this or that. And in fact, when you come into our spaces, I think some people expect us to be like, this is what you should do. Mm-hmm. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to say, okay,
I have questions. Like, I have more questions.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think where a lot of people had an issue there is because there was a lack of context. And that happens all the time with social media, right? Because I'm guilty of this where I oftentimes provide too much context because I'm so afraid of that sort of reaction, to the point that a lot of times my message gets lost because it's so wordy, because it's so nuanced, because I'm providing so much context, because I'm terrified of getting that sort of reaction where it's like,
Yeah.
if you follow me, if you've been, and I don't even love that, like if you've been following my story, if you've been reading my content for years, I've talked about so many of my experiences, right? And without that context, some of my shorter posts might not make sense to people, or they might
Yeah.
cross in a way that doesn't feel good for them. And I get that. And I think that was the argument, was there was missing context there, right? If that's the only
Yeah.
post that people had ever seen from you, then I could understand it. And the part that I wanted to pull out here is that, and this was the part that was missing, and I understand why you did it, because we're both very big on consent, right? And autonomy, and allowing other people the space to tell their story, right? So you weren't telling TLC's side of the story because it wasn't your story to tell. But what I know, and from what I'm hearing just in the interaction based on this trip, what I'm hearing is you took a step back, and you're not like on him constantly and making sure that he's doing all the things that need to be done. And in return, he's started texting you saying, like, before you even get up, right? Which we know doesn't come naturally to him. Before you get up, he sends you a text message saying, hey, here are the things that I've done. Because then that eliminates that piece of your brain that goes into hyperdrive and wants to make sure that all the stuff is done. So you're providing for each other both in those scenarios. Like it's a symbiotic, I don't know if that's the correct word, but
it's mutually beneficial. Yeah. And what actually the conversation that we had, I don't know, yesterday maybe, was I said, here's how I know that we've grown. I don't even need those texts. If he didn't text me and tell me everything he did, I'd still trust to get done.
But you got there because I'm making an assumption, but you probably, part of getting to that place was that he started doing that to ease your nervous system.
Yeah.
And now you don't need it anymore.
Yeah. He now knows what the weight of what that load felt like. Because he's carrying a lot of it now. And so I think it is, when he says that, it is not, hey, I want you to know that I did these things so that you can tell me how much I appreciate you, or you appreciate me. He's doing it because, and I'll have to double check this with him because this is an assumption, but I know him pretty well at this point. I think he's doing it because it's an acknowledgement.
Right.
It's an acknowledgement of like, this is work.
Yeah.
This is work. And this is something that in the collective too, we talk about, because I think so often we don't consider all of the things we are carrying, all of the things we are responsible for, all of the things that we are like mentally keeping track of. We don't consider that load work. And so we're like, oh, I only worked 2 hours today. Or like, I didn't work on my business today at all, so I didn't work. And I'm like, are your kids alive? Is the dog fed? Like, did you feed and water yourself? All of that is work, right? Like if you took care of a plant, it would be work to feed and water and put the plant in sunlight and make sure it had what it needed. Like that is effort. That is labor. And as humans, I think so often, especially as entrepreneurs, like we just have such a skewed way of how we look at our work. And what we've done and what counts and what doesn't. And so that's why I was saying earlier, when people are like, oh, I've been on, the last 6 calls, we haven't talked about my business. I'm like, but we have, because us helping you find where those wounds are and heal them, that actually increases your capacity. You're able to start having conversations in your messaging and marketing with people that you could never have before. You're making realizations around the fact that you don't actually want to work every day. You want to work 1 week out of the month. Like you're having realizations that, oh my gosh, when I feed and water and sun myself, I am such a happier human. Like all of that impacts your business, because your business is not separate from you.
Yeah. When you were talking about the Trauma Sensitive Business Collective before the break, you were talking about how people are always like, I've never been in a space like this before, right? And I think one of the things that sets it apart is that space to sort of play. And sometimes it doesn't feel like play, right? And sometimes it's not enjoyable, but it's that space to expand and figure out what actually needs to happen. And it's, for a lot of us, that's jarring to start with, right? And I see this in my space a lot as well. So my space it's a collective of sorts, but it's a business mastermind, right? But the focus is actually not on productivity. It's not on results, right? Which is really difficult for a lot of people to grapple with, right? And for the most part, people who come into that space recognize before they get here is that we're not focused on like getting you this specific results, right? We're focused on creating a sustainable, profitable business that makes sense for you and your individual situation, right? Because it's for neurodivergent and trauma affected humans who are running their own business. And so I think for a lot of people, when they come into a space like that for the first time, they have already paid, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars in a lot of cases for other programs, other masterminds, other business related offerings, and haven't gotten the result that they were looking for because they're so focused on the do portion. Do you know what I mean? We're so focused on like, what is the thing that we need to do to get the result that we want? And there's value in that. Don't get me wrong. Like there is value in being able to see your return on investment from a financial standpoint. You want to be able to see the return on your investment. And a lot of times you're not going to be able to really see it happening in the moment, right? It's going to be one of those things like we talked about earlier that you look back and you're like, oh, that's where that happened. That's where that shifted, right? And that's why sometimes it takes, right up until the end of that 3-month stint. Or in some cases, folks are like, oh, I feel like I'm right on the cusp. Like, let's come back, right? Because I think it didn't like 90% of the last cohort come back for this one.
So we started with 9 humans in August, and then in January, we kind of did like a wonky thing in November, December that I won't get into, but like we kept it going.
Yeah.
8 of the 9 came back in January, and then 7 of the 9 came back in March. And then in March, like 5 of the 9 signed up for a whole year.
Yeah. That's massive retention, like just for the record.
Oh, yeah. And then this round we have 17 people, and I think 14 are continuing on. 15, something like that. Which is wild because we actually repeat. Well, we don't completely repeat the modules because we're growing. Sarah and I are, we co-lead this together, and TLC is our support coach. And actually what's really cool is TLC's role shifting. So TLC, what we noticed is he's been on our calls and he's been taking notes. And he's been like tracking what people are doing and finding places where like they are getting stuck or like information, like where they need more information. And TLC, I'm allowed to share this. I got permission yesterday. TLC is starting his own business, TLC Research. And so what he is doing is basically, here's a great example, right? You are going into a new area of business and you're looking for a specific type of client, but you're not sure where they hang out. You're not sure what, like, if they exist. You don't know these things. So TLC will hop on a call with you.
Going, and I'm so excited.
I know. He'll hop on a call with you. He will get what you're looking for, and then he will go research it. He will find the information for you, and he will hand it back to you in a nice, pretty bow.
Wow.
So also, he did this for me. So I had somebody reach out and say, hey, I think that you could come to this company and do a talk. I had never heard of them. He heard the name of this company and he was like, babe, do you know who they are? And I was like, no. And he's like, I love that this 10-figure company reached out to you. 10-figure a year company reached out to you, talk to you about coming to educate. And you're like, oh, okay, sure. And you like, don't even fucking know who they are. So he's like, so I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize it was that big of a deal. So he went, I didn't even ask him to do this, but he knew it would be helpful. He went and researched and found like their mission, their vision, like who their VP of sales was, like all of these things and all of these pieces. And he presented it to me and he was like, when you go to them, here's where you can find the connections. Here's what they're going to want to hear about. Here's the return on investment that matters to them. Here are their KPIs. I don't think people realize how massively helpful that is.
I do, just from a place of like, that's the process that I go through when I'm thinking about bringing on a new client. And I don't know that I've ever publicly shared that, but when someone expresses interest in working with me on a high touch level, I go and find out everything that I can about them and their business before I ever talk about them. So that I can spend the entire time talking to them, finding out what lights them up as an individual. Right. Yeah. So I come loaded with information about what their business is and what they do, as much as I can gather from what they've shared online, because I work with a lot of solopreneurs and small businesses, right? Yeah. What's available is what's available online. It's a little bit different for the company that you're talking about, because I know the company you're talking about, and I laughed so hard the first time you told me, because I was like, how do you not know?
Because I'm not like, I was never in that phase. But like, here's the other cool part about this though, is like, there's so many other places that he can do research for you. And so part of what he's going to do, anyone who's joining the collective this next round is going to get an hour a month of research from him.
Wow.
So yeah.
What?
So you get an hour a month of research from him. And if you're like, I don't even know what I need you to research, well, guess what? He's on the calls, he listens, and he can be like, hey, I could go find this for you. I could go do this for you. I could go do this for you. And so there's so many different things. If you're like, well, I'm thinking about starting a podcast, but I'm not sure what I should name it. He can be like, okay, tell me the name of your podcast. He can go look and be like, this is what's in that arena already. This is what they're talking about. You're going to be talking about something slightly different. So maybe we put in this keyword. Like, those are the types of things that he can do. But the reason that it's so amazing is because he already knows you.
Yeah.
And you're not paying some random person who has no idea who you are, who has no context about your business, to go do some research for you. So now people will do that. But the reason I brought this in is because, you know, Sarah and I, from a curriculum standpoint, this repeats.
Right.
Every quarter we repeat it, but every quarter she and I are looking at it and going, okay, what else are we adding in? Okay, what are we taking out? Okay, like, how does this need to shift as the collective, the members in the collective are changing, and as we are changing as leaders? And so people keep coming back because as we're evolving, they're evolving. As the world's shifting, we're shifting it. And so it's never the same thing.
Yeah, they've already seen it shift several times over at this point.
Yeah.
What you're doing is tweaking and fine tuning. And there's also so much space within each container to get to know the individual humans within that container. So when you were talking about TLC, taking notes on the calls and like knowing what each person is up to, I think there's so much value in that. Like, that's a thing that I don't know that, like, that's something that I do naturally, but I never would have thought to like make I probably would have thought of that actually, now that I'm thinking about it, like make a spreadsheet and say like, okay, this is what this person was doing on this call. And then on the next call that came up again, but this is how that had shifted or changed or transformed. Or in some cases, it's like, okay, this has come up on every single call you've been on. And it's been, and I'm not making anybody wrong for this, but we've had this same conversation 5 different times in a row. Something stuck.
Yeah. Something.
Right? What do we massage out?
And that's happened. And here's the other thing is, you know, Sarah and I take turns doing the calls in the collective. So we have big group calls where we all get together and like we do a workshop style thing. And Sarah and I both, we take turns talking about like what's within our expertise. And she's Pepper Potts, I'm Tony Stark. She's strategy, vision and mindset, right? Like that's how we
so accurate.
we both can dabble in the other, like we're both strong in the other places too, but like that's our zones of genius.
Right.
And so Sarah's on call sometimes and I'm not on, but TLC's on there. And so I can go back and look at the notes and be like, okay, so this is what happened 2 weeks ago. Now I can be prepped for where they're at today. And so that is something that I think is, again, I don't see people doing this the way that we've done it. And it's just such a cool space.
Yeah.
That's just all that's all I can say about it. It's such a cool space and I learned so much in there. But the amount of people who are in there who are like, I have never felt so seen and heard. I've never felt like we have people who cry on calls that have never cried in public. We have people saying things that they've never said out loud to another human. Like there's just a level of vulnerability in that space, but also it's from a place of not like, oh, we're all gonna rush in and save you. It's like, yeah, like you're a badass, like you are a very powerful, insightful, amazing entrepreneur. And also you have feelings, you have pain, you have wobbly moments, and cool, we're here for all of it.
Yeah.
We talked for 2 hours.
I know. I'm like looking at the clock, like we could easily keep going, and you have like another training again in 20 minutes. You should probably you should probably shovel some food into your mouth. And
I know. I was just thinking that. I was like, have I eaten? See, again, I had a chocolate chip cookie for breakfast because TLC is not here. That's why.
Okay, good.
I'm a toddler.
All right. So let's find some protein somewhere in the hotel and put it in your stomach before you go teach for the next 4 hours, because and then have a break and then teach for another 2 hours.
So I love this. And I'm so glad that we're going to just like put it in both, because I think both of our audiences need to hear the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for my audience to come over. Like, I feel like our audience knows you, but I don't know that they knew you had a podcast. I don't know that they knew you had the Hive. And I don't know that they knew you had all these other spaces. So I'm excited for the Becoming Trauma Informed podcast audience to be like, oh my gosh, I'm in love with Shannon. Even more than I realized. Thank you for doing this with me. This was, like you said, it was a long time coming.
Yeah. I'm glad. It's funny, at the beginning or a little while in, you said something about like considering canceling today. And I had that thought. And then also because similarly, I don't have quite as much going on as you, but I'm also exhausted right now.
Yeah.
And there was a moment of like, I don't know if I have the capacity to do this today. And then I was like, no, it's going to be like it always is with Lee, and we're both going to get exactly what we need from it. And I think we did. So
yeah.
So I'm grateful for that. All right. Before we wrap up, we're going to put everything in the show notes, but just quickly, where do you hang out most? Where can people find you? We've already talked about a lot of the upcoming offers, so I won't make you go through all that again, but
I will answer this with being under the sole condition that you have to answer it too. So I hang out a lot on TikTok. So at that one trauma coach #1, that's one of my favorite spaces to like just give people 60 seconds to 3 minute little bump ups. And then Facebook's our Facebook group, Becoming Trauma Informed, where you are our chief nurturer, is my other favorite space. So yeah, you can find us there. And then we have our website, institutefortrauma.com. That's like where you can find all the things we're doing. And by the time this comes out, the one piece we haven't talked about is that we just started a merch line that I just am doing the final approval of the website in just a moment, and it's going to go live and it's going to be amazing. So, invitation, check that out, because one of the things we didn't talk about is that we are really big on accessibility at the Institute. And I don't pretend to know anyone's situation. I don't pretend to be able to look at somebody's gender, skin color, nationality, religion, and go, oh, okay, you need a sponsored spot. So at the Institute, we have something called a self-qualifying sponsorship. So if you come into our space and you're like, hey, I can't afford this, and we have money in our sponsorship fund, cool, you're in. So our merch line, every bit of profit, every single bit of profit off of our merch line goes into our sponsorship fund. And we also have a shirt that every quarter we have a sponsored shirt, and every cent of that sale, including what it costs to make the shirt, we donate to that organization. So this quarter, from June 1st through August 1st, I get that right, is going to be It's Classified, which is a domestic violence support nonprofit. And so that will be on the merch site as well. So if you buy that shirt, know that $20 is going to that.
I'm so glad that you brought up the merch line, because I think a lot of people probably were questioning, like, why is this happening? So it's good that it's like, there's a purpose behind this. Just assume going forward that if either of us is doing anything, there's intention and purpose behind it.
Yes, this is very conscious capitalism. Like this is you, it's mutually beneficial conscious capitalism. You are getting something, we are getting something, the organizations that, or the people that are being sponsored or served by you buying the thing are getting something. So it's a triangle of mutually beneficial outcomes.
Love it. Okay.
Okay, so your turn.
Okay,
yeah, your turn.
For me, I mostly hang out on Facebook still.
Cool. I know.
I whether it's in my own space or in the Becoming Trauma Informed group, those are the places that I am most of the time if I'm online. I'm very intentional about my time online, and I try not to do a whole lot of it. But if I'm online, it's probably either in my own personal spaces on Facebook or in the Becoming Trauma Informed group. But you can also find me on my website, shannonkill.com. I don't update it very often, and good luck figuring out if I have any current offers on there. But yeah, just find me on Facebook. That's the easiest thing. That's just the easiest thing. So, okay. Go eat some food. Well,
okay. And you go, I'll see you in like 17 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Invitation to head to our show notes to check out the offers and connections we mentioned, or you can just head straight over to institutefortrauma.com and hop in our email list so that you never miss any of the cool things that we're doing over at the Institute. Invitation to be well and to take care of yourself this week, and we'll see you next time.